Hey everyone, welcome to the Graced Health Podcast. I know I say this a lot, but I'm really excited about this conversation today and the topic today, which is CBTI. And you're going to hear about what that is. I have joining me Kathleen Sassier. Kathy, I'm just going to let you describe what you do because I feel like you can help others understand what you do, and you do so many different things in so many different areas. I'm just going to let you describe what all you do real quickly.
Sure. I'll just give a quick background. So started in community mental health in 91, working in domestic violence and sexual trauma, and then decided to get my master's degree, started working with children in trauma, adults again in trauma, then moved on to military, first responders, law enforcement. Through all of this trauma work, a big consistent thing that I would see would be sleep issues, right? And so I didn't really know how to treat sleep issues. So what progressed for me was I worked in that, and then my husband retired out of the military, and I started working with people in substance use treatment and also working with horses. So I do a lot with horses and the nervous system and calming the nervous system with the effects that has on us. And again, here comes sleep, right? And so when you and I were talking about different things and you said something about CBTI, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm trained in that, right? So that kind of got me excited, and to be able to come on here and talk about sleep with people, because I'll be honest with you, I really, again, didn't understand. They didn't really train us in it. They talked about how we needed to ask people, were they sleeping, but they didn't really tell us how to help them sleep. And so when I was working with the military, it was really obvious, right, that this was an issue that was contributing to increased anxiety, increased depression, just struggling in all sorts of different ways. And so I would try different strategies, and they just didn't seem to be effective or weren't effective enough. And so then I had the opportunity to take CBTI at University of Pennsylvania with Dr. Perilous, and he's one of the leaders in CBTI, which is really cool. And I went to University of Pennsylvania, stayed there. I think it was like a week-long class, but it seemed like it was a long time. And I had dual intentions. One intention, of course, was for the people that I was working with, but it was also for myself, because during that time, I was starting to go through menopause. And between the types of jobs I did and my hormonal imbalances, my sleep was horrible.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just kind of got used to it and just basically said, that's who I am, and this is how I'm going to have to be. And then I took this class. And so when I took this class, I applied all these things. I thought, well, if I'm going to teach other people how to do it, I better do it myself. So I applied all these things to myself, and wow, it worked.
Okay.
And so that's when I got sold, and it was about in 2010.
Well, I feel like you just locked in my entire community of like, oh, this all came around right during, the menopause transition, because that has changed our sleep. It has changed mine. And for the most part, I do okay, but I do have these little moments of not having good sleep. And after learning some about CBTI, I'm like, oh yeah, well, this makes sense because of what else was going on in my world right now. And I have more comments, but we're going to say that as we dig in. So first, we have not yet said what CBTI is. So I'm going to ask you if you can define that and how that is different than what the internet calls like sleep maxing right now, which is all of the different things and tips and tricks and hacks and supplements and all of that kind of stuff. So what is CBTI, and how is it different than everything we are seeing on the internet?
Right. Well, CBTI, most people know what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And then it has a dash and a tiny I. It's not a big I, it's a tiny I. So it's CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But truly, if I were to define it, I would say it's behavioral therapy for insomnia. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But the part I really like about it is it's evidence-based. It's research-based. It works, right? And part of, again, like I said, what sold me on it was I would take medication to sleep and I'd feel worse in the morning than I did when I didn't have a good night's sleep, right? Because I was groggy, I felt crappy, and I just didn't want to be, I didn't function well. I'm already experiencing some level of brain fog because of the mental pause, right? And what I was experiencing. And now I added this onto it, so that wasn't any good. And so the other piece that I'll explain or mention is that I also struggled with sleep apnea. And so sleep apnea had been diagnosed early on, and so I struggled with that. That was an added thing, which is not uncommon either. And one of the frontline treatments for anyone with a sleep disorder, so when you go to a sleep to do the sleep apnea test and to the sleep clinic and everything else, is CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia.
Interesting.
And they provide you with, because it works, right? And when you have sleep apnea, if you take sleeping medication, it actually makes it worse. Like if you have neurological pauses in your breathing, it can make that worse. It can make you stop breathing.
Wow.
So it's something that you really want to be mindful about. What am I actually doing to my body in desperation to try to sleep? Am I making it worse? Right? It's a pretty simple tool to use, and there's strategies that you practice, and it takes like maybe 4 sessions, 8 sessions. It depends on the person and their level of willingness to do the work, and at the same time change some of the things that they need to change in the environment. And it revolves around a couple different things. It revolves around sleep restriction, stimulus control, which is the environment, right? And then also, what are the thoughts that go along with my sleep? What do I think about sleep?
You said a few things that I'm wondering if you can clarify some, and I might be jumping ahead in some of our questions, but you said sessions. Does that mean that someone needs to see a specialist to be able to do this, or is this something that they can do on their own?
I really think it depends on the person. So I did it on my own, but I had just taken this class. So I was in an intensive class and I practiced everything that they gave me. Since that time, when I took that class, they've created this amazing phone app that is completely free. It's called CBTI Coach.
Okay.
Right? And it's through the Department of Veterans Affairs, or I think it's Department of Veterans Affairs, but it doesn't matter if you're not a veteran. It is an amazing app. It has all of the stuff that I used to have to carry around in 3-ring binders when I would go meet with someone in this app, right?
Okay.
And so you can do it on your own with that, but you need to follow the protocol, right? There's protocol to practice. It also really depends on I don't even know if that's true, because I was going to say the extent of the sleep disorder, how much it's affecting you. I always think it is helpful to have someone as an accountability partner or a guide on this, and someone that kind of does understand the concept of CBTI. Most therapists are trained in something, whether it's relaxation techniques, meditation, those mindfulness, but the CBTI is a little bit different. So it wouldn't take much for a therapist to get that training or to be able to guide you through it by taking a look at the app and just providing that support. So it really, again, it depends on the person. It depends on what their needs are.
Okay.
And I've had people that have come to me and said, look, I have horrible sleep, I need help. And I'll be like, okay, so look, let's start with this, right? And so then they'll come back the next session, they'll be like, wow, like I did it. I'm in the app, man, I love it. It's working. And I'll be like, okay, so why don't we just check back in a couple of weeks and maybe you don't need to see me, right?
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So we'll get to my next question. I think we'll get to it, but just so you know, the question is going to be like, define sleep restriction, because that sounds kind of strange. But put a pin in that, because we'll get back there. And this is one reason why I was so excited to find out that you did this, because I hear so many women, my friends, my community, like my Graced Health community, the community that I live in, and they all talk about how they're exhausted, but their minds won't shut off at night. Or often the other thing is they go straight to sleep, but then they wake up at 3 a.m. and they're wide awake. And so many of them are like, well, I guess this is just how much sleep I got. And so then they get up for the day. So talk to us some about like, what is within the realm of what you do, what is happening with our brains in those two situations, and they might be different, and so you can define that. And then tell us how CBTI can help that.
Okay, good. So we call that waking up in the middle of the night, mid-insomnia.
Okay.
Right? So early insomnia would be defined as I can't fall asleep. Mid-insomnia is when I wake up in the middle of the night, right? And I can't go back to sleep. And then late insomnia would be if I wake up at like, when I normally get up at 5, but I'm waking up at like 3:30 and I can't go to sleep, right? So we want to define what the issue is, because sometimes that determines what we do to make the changes. But I want to go back to a couple of things, because it's important that you have kind of, and then we'll get back to what you're saying, right? So the whole core aspects of CBTI is, first of all, it's called stimulus control. So what am I associating with bed, right? So if I go to bed, and, I always ask people like, well, when do you go to bed? And they'll say 10 o'clock. And then I'll say, okay, so when do you fall asleep? Oh, not till 12 or 1. So I'm laying in bed from 10 to 12 or 1, right? So I say, okay, look, there's a rule in CBTI. There's only 2 things you're doing in bed: sleep and sex, and that's it. And if you're not doing those, you need to get out of there, right? So we talk about that, reassociating the bed with sleep, right, or sex. And so it's really recognizing and acknowledging, when is it that I need to get up? And that's where people usually start off wrong, is they lay down, whether they're, they have a partner or significant other, and they want to go to bed at the same time, and they're not tired, right? So they lay down, and what they do is they read, or they watch TV, or they do something else. So now I'm in bed and I'm doing something that should not be associated with my bed.
Hold on.
So
You're saying even getting in bed and reading for 10 minutes or however long is not part of this protocol. I'm shocked to hear this.
Right. Well, 10 minutes could be okay. But here's the thing. If you're coming to me, you have a problem. Right?
Yeah.
And so if you can lay in bed for 10 minutes and read and then go to sleep, you're okay. You don't have a problem.
Okay.
We'll talk about the mid part in a minute.
Okay.
Right? But we're talking about the early insomnia. So most people that show up, it's because they can't sleep. And so once we start to look at this puzzle, we start to find some pieces. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that your husband goes to bed and you want to go to bed with him, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that is to be intimate, or whether it is because you just like to go to sleep at the same time, right? You like to get into bed with them at the same time. And so what happens though is you lay there, and your mind starts going. And now what your mind associates with the bed and the pillow is this is my thinking time. Okay? And so then it struggles with shutting off. So that's one, early insomnia. Mid-insomnia, I get up. I don't know about you, I'm 62, so I'm past the mental pause thing, but I've got other things going on, like I've got to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Me
right?
too.
So I get up, I have to go to the bathroom, and I come back and I can't go back to sleep, right? And so the problem is if I stay in bed and then my mind starts going. But with some of the strategies that we're going to talk about, like sleep restriction, sleep compression, that type of thing, is if I tell myself I've got to get up, after 15 minutes, if I haven't fallen back to sleep, I get up and I go sit in a chair somewhere. Even if it's in my bedroom, it's okay, as long as it's not in my bed. I can read, I can do something during that time until I start to feel a little sleepy. As soon as I start to feel sleepy, I go back to bed. And basically this is the behavioral part. We're modifying the behavior, okay? And we get ourselves into nope, you're not going to go to sleep, you're going to get up. And eventually, after a period of time, it's frustrating sometimes at first, and you think this is never going to work, but it really does work, okay? The other thing is then the late insomnia, when we get up early in the morning and we can't fall back to sleep. Part of the reason we can't fall back to sleep is because our brain gets going. And then we tell ourselves, I'm not even going to try, I'm frustrated. But if we have some time that we could sleep for, we can get up for that 10 minutes, do that same exact thing, 10 or 15 minutes, and then go back to bed and get some rest. It takes time to do this. I said 4 to 8 sessions, but that's usually over a period of probably about a month and a half, to be able to practice, get different strategies into practice. So this is where kind of sleep restriction and compression comes into play. So most people think, I got to go to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock and then I'm going to get up at 6. Okay, well, that's 9 hours. That is way too many hours to be in bed. We really don't need that much sleep. You know, we need about 7 or 8 hours sleep, but we need 7 or 8 hours compressed and really good restful sleep.
Well, I also wonder if people think I need to go to bed at 9 because I have to get up at 6, and because 2 or 3 of those hours I'm going to be lying awake in bed.
Correct. And so then we will lie and wake in bed. You see, so what happens is we do something called sleep compression. So I'm gonna take this sleep and I'm gonna compress it. So I start from where I need to get up. If I need to get up at 6 o'clock and I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? I'm gonna go to bed at 10 or 11. Okay, that's it, and that's what I do. And what happens is when you have a disordered sleep pattern, how about we put that instead of sleep disorder, a disordered sleep pattern, if I can reset it, I could go back and have the luxury of doing that at another point. I just need to implement this to get my brain back into a reset, what it's supposed to be associating the bed with, which is sleep, right? So sleep restriction, sleep compression, that's really important. So sometimes what we do is we make it even more where I create like a sleep debt, like I need to sleep. So I don't allow myself to go to bed until even a little bit later. And so let's say I go to bed at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to get 7 hours of sleep. And I'm still waking up and I'm thinking, gosh, I'm still kind of tired. I want more sleep than that. All right, well, if I can do 7 hours without waking up in the middle of the night, which was one of my issues, now I can start to add a little bit more time. But the way it works is we can only add 15 minutes at a time. I can't add a half an hour. I can't add an hour. I can add 15 minutes.
Okay. That's
And I
not a
need to do
huge variance.
No, but I need to do 15 minutes and I need to do it without any changes in my sleep for at least a week. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to start adding, my goal, I want to add a whole hour, but it's going to take me a bit to add a whole hour. Okay, it could take a whole month to add an hour. I need to get my brain neurologically used to this, because if I go ahead and say I'm adding an hour, there's a high probability I'm going to go back into that disruptive sleep pattern. But if I add 15 minutes and I'm successful for a week, I can add another 15 minutes. And what's fascinating to me, there's no way I can predict. Like I can tell someone, look, it's a possibility you can add another hour. I don't know the answer to that, right? But what happens is when the brain gets to almost like this tipping point, it will start disruptive sleep pattern again. So if I say my goal is another hour, but my brain doesn't really need another hour, once I get to that point, it'll start disruption again. So then I can go back to
Why
it's
is
just
that?
It's physiologically what our body needs. And so this is where the other part is if I say to my friend and I say, man, how many hours of sleep do you get? Right? I get 10. I get 10 hours. I'm like, man, I'd love to get 10 hours. The problem is I probably wouldn't. I think I would, right? But 10 hours is probably too much for my body. The only time I might need that extra sleep is if I'm sick, right? Or I'm going through something really stressful and I need to just rest and take care of my body. But it might also be that I don't need sleep per se. I need rest, right?
Yes.
The other time, huge, right, about this is there is no daytime napping with CBTI. If you're a napper and you like a little nap, you can't do it when you're doing CBTI. No go.
I'm really sorry to hear that. I don't nap all that often, but I will go in like phases where I nap, but I don't typically have what you are talking about, but I have so many people in my world who do.
Yes. And it's because if you're thinking about what we're saying here, it's neurological, right? But it's all connected. The whole mind, body, spirit thing's connected in the neurological and the physiological and all that kind of stuff. But basically what happens is if I'm getting what I need for sleep and it's restful, the amount of energy I have during the day is more exponential, right? I feel rested. I'm getting a good restful sleep.
Yeah.
So sleep restriction, sleep compression, right?
Okay.
That's part of a component of this. And this is the other part where you actually get like a prescribed sleep. Okay, so if you tell me I go to bed at whatever time. And my focus is always going to be, what time do you need to get up in the morning? Okay, so I need to get up at 6. Okay, if you need to get up at 6, in my house I got to get up at 5 because of horses and stuff, right? But if I need to get up at 6, then I'm going to go to bed at 11, right? I'm going to start with 7 hours and see how that goes. And remember, the thing about CBTI that I find fascinating, so I told you, major sleep disturbance I had back in 2010, and I did the CBTI, pretty quickly reset it, and then I used these strategies. I was able, after probably about a month or so of having pretty regular sleep for those restful sleep times, I was able to switch it up because I had a job where I'd have to travel a lot and I'd move, it would be different things, and I'd be going out with people at night until later on, right, and all that. And at first I thought, I'm never going to be able to do that again, but that's not true. So I was able to do that, and then when I got back off of that, trip, I would come home and I would go back to the reset again. Okay, Kath, you got to get up at 6. This is when you're going to go to bed. And so I started to do that, and what would happen is then I could be more flexible. As long as I fell back on that reset, what I needed for my healthy sleep, what I had come up with as that balance, and that's where it's unique, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm sitting here listening to this through the lens of so many of these women who have that mid insomnia that you defined as the waking up at 3 a.m. How does this sleep compression and sleep restriction impact that 3 a.m. wake up? Like, I guess that's the question, because I'm sitting here,
Yep.
I'm sitting here listening to this and wondering if they're thinking, but how does that apply if I'm waking, like I can fall asleep fine, but it's just that period of time between like 3 and 5.
Because it's usually they're going to bed too early. They're trying to give themselves too long of a window.
Okay.
And so it comes like, we call it Swiss cheese sleep, right? Where there's holes in the sleep. So I'm not doing what I need to. Think about it like one of the guys described it in the class like a washing machine cycle. So you know how sometimes you have like your favorite cycle and that you want to just do the rinse, you know what I'm saying? Or you want an extra rinse and you go back as if it doesn't have extra rinse because it's not a newer machine. You just go all the way around to the rinse and you let it do it again. Well, it messes up that cycle thing after a while because it was never designed to do that. And so what starts to happen is we're messing up our cycle. So we're not really getting a good REM sleep. We're not getting the good restful sleep. We're not actually going into it. A lot of people nowadays, they have those rings or they have the watches that tell them if they're not going into REM. And usually they're not going into REM or that really relaxed, rejuvenative, restorative sleep because they've got their Swiss cheese in it. They've got too much space in between when I went to bed and when I got to get up. And so they need to do that compression.
Okay.
And what starts to happen is once you can teach your brain what it's supposed to do in bed, it starts to get that restorative sleep. It starts to see the benefit of that restorative sleep.
Okay. So you're saying that even if you're falling asleep at 10 or 9 or whatever, and you have to get up at 6, but you're awake at 3, just say from 3 to 4:30, practically every night, then you're saying that even if you're falling asleep right away, compress that up and try to like reset the brain so that it will do it all together. But then what happens, I'm totally getting into the weeds right now, but I can hear the voices behind me, like, but what if I go to sleep then at 10 and then I'm still waking up from 3 to 4:30 and now I've gotten even less sleep because I didn't go to bed at 9 like I used to and I still have to get up at 6.
And that could happen for a little bit, okay, until your brain realizes I'm pushing it. I'm trying to restrict this. I'm compressing it. Because what's happening in that time around before 3 and after 4:30, you're not getting a restful sleep, right? So it could be uncomfortable. Lots of times they'll talk to, when I talk to people about it, I said, like, let's take a time where you can take a couple days off, right? And maybe you've got a long weekend. Let's practice it over the long weekend and see how that goes, right? And the other part about this that I like is that, so talking about the weekend, people are like, well, does that mean I have to do the same thing? Do I have to go to bed at the same time on the weekend? eventually, no. And usually after about a month of once you get the brain reset on the sleep, after about a month, the brain's smart enough to know, oh, it's a Friday night. Like, I don't know about you, but a lot of times on a Friday night, I'm wide awake now. Like, I'm like, man, I could stay up all night. But Thursday night, the night before, I'm like falling asleep zoning out at 8 o'clock, right? Because I'm tired.
Right.
What's the difference? The difference is I know I don't have to work on Saturday morning, right? I don't have to get up at any particular time. So this is really more cognitive than we think. See, this is where we also start to talk about the cognitive therapy. What are the underlying messages we're telling ourselves about sleep?
Well, that is one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because obviously I have a podcast. I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and this was kind of like just a little side comment that someone made one time. And it was essentially, someone said, if you say things like, I can't sleep, I'm always awake at 3 o'clock, then that contributes to the problem. And as a therapist, I have a feeling that you can speak to us about that. So those underlying messages, talk to us some about yes messages, like, or as the Gen Zers would say, like green flags and red flags of messages that we're saying to ourselves.
Right. So that's where the C part comes in, the cognitive part.
Okay.
We're going to talk about what are the messages that we have. Some of the messages I've already kind of said it. I need to have 8 hours of sleep, or I need to have 10 hours of sleep, right? I have to have it. Ever since I was a kid, I've had to have it. These are unhelpful statements, right? And so what I would say to them then is, okay, so if I were to tell you that you could sleep about 7 to 8 hours of sleep and wake up in the morning and felt like you slept 10 hours, right? Because that's what your dream is. This, even though you've been trying to do it and you're staying in bed for 10 to 12 hours, you're not rested, right? And you don't feel good about it. Would you want it? Of course I want it. Okay, so then we've got to try this, right? But thinking about the statements I'm saying, like I always wake up at this time, or I never get any sleep, or all of those things, it's really important to allow ourselves to acknowledge the narrative. What is the narrative that we're telling ourselves, right? And so a lot of times this is also why having a therapist is helpful, because I can listen to the narrative and I can let him say that, and then I'll say, okay, look, what I'm hearing you say, and I said, and I think that's based on past experiences, and rightfully so. In the past, you don't sleep well, right? You don't get a restful sleep. But if I tell myself that, then my brain's just going to keep doing it, right? So allowing myself to say something like, in the past, I have only gotten 4 hours of sleep. Or in the past, I have struggled with sleep, right? It's crazy. Just changing that, adding that part, in the past, provides my brain an opportunity to do something different in the future. And it's just a simple cognitive strategy.
Okay. That seems like a very simple thing to add in. And if I hadn't been doing what I have been doing for a long time, that would feel very woo-woo. And I believe you.
Yeah.
Because I've had enough of these types of conversations.
Yeah. And I thought it was all kind of woo-woo too, right? And if it wasn't for the fact that, so the guy that, like, 2010, what's that, 15 years ago, right? Or no, it's more than that.
16
years ago now.
Yeah.
He was just really like a smart aleck, and he was making jokes, and he's like, yeah, I didn't believe this stuff either, and he was joking about it. And I don't know that I would have tried it, but I tried it. And it for me, it was such an amazing thing, because I had not slept well all my life. I'd had sleep apnea issues since I was a little kid.
Wow.
And no one really knew what it was, right? And so then when I finally got a CPAP, of course, that was a whole nother nightmare, trying to sleep with that thing, right? And now the cool part about it is, I go to bed, I put on my CPAP machine, and I'm asleep within 5 minutes. And I get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and I go back to bed, and I'm asleep within less than 5 minutes.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, but it took time. And then when things disrupt it, I go back to the things again. I'm like, oh boy, I got to do that again. I do back to the reset. But the other part that's really important, so we talked about, the behavioral part, we talked about the cognitive part. The other part is really what you talked about, laying in bed and not being able to quiet the mind. And so the importance of practicing relaxation strategies.
Okay, talk
Right.
to us about that because I think that would be helpful for everyone.
Sure. So basically, one of the things that I mentioned was the CBTI Coach, which is a free app. You just go in, it's CBTI Coach, that's what it's called. It's kind of a purple color with a moon.
And we'll put that in the link. We'll put the link
Yes.
to that in the show notes.
And in it, it has tools. So in the tools, it has quiet your mind. Imagine that. That's what it's called, right?
Huh.
Quiet your mind. And it has different things. It has the bedtime stories, the ambient sounds. It has different sort of breathing strategies, progressive muscle relaxation. So it really depends on what's going on, right? One of the things that people they try to avoid these thoughts that they have. So I tell them, look, your brain is finally slowing down from the day and it's remembering everything that you forgot to remember, right? So put a pad of paper next to your bed, and believe it or not, just jotting it down. It tells your brain, because there's not anything you can do about it right now. You can't rewind the day, you can't start the next day yet, but your brain won't let you stop until you've done something that it knows that you're going to remember it, right? And so writing it down on a piece of paper next to your bed.
Quick question on that. May I assume that you want someone actually with a pen and a paper writing and not pulling up their notes app on their phone?
So I used to just say pen and paper, but I have to be honest, I use my notes on my phone.
Okay. That's a hot take.
It's a hot take, but the issue is that you've got to make sure that you're not getting into other things, right?
Okay.
So here again, I'm telling you about this phone app.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
I'm telling
true.
you, and so part of one of the things in the phone app that it talks about when you get in there, it talks about preventing insomnia, creating new sleep habits, right? So it talks about going to bed only when sleepy, getting out of bed when you can't sleep, get out of bed at your prescribed time, set up your sleep environment. So it talks about your sleep environment. It talks about not, having notifications on your phone. It talks a lot about that. We live in a world of technology. And so the other thing that a lot of people, and CBTI says absolutely not, is they have TV in their room, in their bedroom. And that's a big no-no, right? It's a big no-no because lots of people say, well, I can't fall asleep unless I have my TV on. And I'll have people that come to me specifically for sleep disturbance and they refuse to take the TV out of their bedroom. And I'll say, well, we can try it, right? But I'm not sure that it can be effective because your brain is staying awake to hear what's going on. So you will fall asleep, but you will most likely not go into a deep REM sleep because your brain is still trying to pay attention to what's going on in the environment, right? And this is also something that I've used a lot with people that they have shift, they work at night.
Uh-huh.
And so this is another thing that's very effective in your environment and using blackout curtains and doing all sorts of things to create that environment just for sleep, right? Very important. So progressive muscle relaxation, that's one of the ones that's in the CBTI Coach. So doing it before you go to bed, really, really important, but also practicing it throughout the day so that when you go to take your brain to that state of calm and relaxed, it's easier to take it there right before bed.
Can you define what progressive muscle relaxation is? Because I'm not sure I'm super familiar with that.
Yeah, I love this technique. It's really simple. You don't have to have a guided one. There's a guided one in there. But basically what you're doing, you start out first by sitting comfortably in a chair. Okay. And
Or can you do it in bed?
you could do it in bed,
Okay.
but remember, we don't want to take up too much of our
Oh,
not
but
falling
that's not
asleep
sleep or
time.
sex. So don't do
Right,
it
it's
in
not
bed.
sleep or sex.
Okay.
I'm not saying don't,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is to practice it first, right? Like there's times where I've been, like I work until, what time I work till at night, and I come home and I'm like, man, I need to go to bed.
Mhm.
And I think, okay, but my brain's not quiet yet.
Right.
But my husband's already in bed. So I'll go and I'll brush my teeth and I'll get ready for bed and I'll lay down and I'll hear my brain and I'll be like, okay, you're not ready yet. So I'll do a progressive muscle relaxation bed and then I just fall asleep. So, but that's after years of practicing it, right? So progressive muscle relaxation is you basically start with your toes and you tighten your toes, like curl them up, and then you relax. And then you tighten them again and you relax. Okay, and then you do the same with your calves and you go all the way up your legs, your butt, you tighten your back. You squeeze your hands, right, like this. You squish your face and you relax and you just do that slowly all the way up and all the way back. That's progressive muscle relaxation. The mindset behind that is that, when people say just relax, right, we try to go like this and relax. But when we tighten those muscles, those large muscles, it also tightens all those small muscles around there and all the fascia and all that other stuff that's attached to it. And now I relax it. And it sends this message to my muscles and that part around my body, in my body, to just relax. And I don't just do my whole body at once. I start piece by piece and I go all the way up and I go all the way down. And in there, in the app, there's an audio version of progressive muscle relaxation. It's very helpful. And I like that one. That's a good one.
Okay. That's good to know. Well, what's interesting is my husband and I will practice our breathing and our mindful breathing at different times of the day. He has found he needs to do at the end of the day just because he's got to quiet his mind. And I don't know where he got that idea, but that's what he does. I don't know that he knows that there's a name for that. But that is absolutely what he does. And I'm also having a memory from when Anne Swanson was on here talking about her book, Meditation for the Real World. And she guided us through that exact thing as well. So I love it when just totally, for whatever reason, God, I don't know, it's like, oh yes, on this conversation it was here, and on this conversation it was here. So I will link to that in the show notes if anyone wants to go listen to that episode as well. But yeah, he really likes that progressive muscle relaxation.
It's so easy. You can do it anywhere, and you don't have to have the audio because you just start at the bottom, you move your way up, and then you could start at the top and move your way down and then come all the way back. It's a very easy, simple one to do.
Okay. I think a lot of people have probably heard a lot of these, but can you go through, you mentioned sleep hygiene earlier. Can you go through sleep hygiene and just kind of share some of the basics and beyond, if you want to do that, of other things that we need to be doing, including not having a television in our room?
Right. So sleep hygiene is really, it just kind of makes sense. Having good sleep habits, like right before we go to bed, right? Like brushing our teeth, having that habit, washing our face. What is it that you do every night before you go to bed? A lot of people will say, well, I don't really have a routine. Okay, well, let's create a routine around that, because what it does is it starts to prepare our body and our brain. Oh, we're going to go to bed, right? And so we're starting to prepare before we even get into the bed, right? But it's also about, and this is where individual differences. Some people can exercise at night and still go to sleep. Some people cannot.
I am one of those people.
You have to know you're right. I'm not either. I can't do it either. I'm like, yes, I'm ready. I can't go to sleep after that. And so it's the same with being intimate. Some people are okay being intimate before they go to sleep at night, and some people would prefer being intimate in the morning. So having those conversations, especially around when you're struggling already with sleep disturbance, about how to not disrupt the intimacy piece, because that's so important, but at the same time being mindful of how that affects your sleep until you can get yourself reset, right? Because that's the other part. I want you to know that it's pretty strict when you're doing it, but it doesn't have to be that way forever, right? And then again, eating before bed, how does that affect my brain and my body, my digestion, all of those things? Some people need to eat a little something before they take medication. Some people take medication at night, right? That's the other thing, really learning about your medications. So if you take medications, some people just take it at night because that's when they remember, or it's easier to remember. but they don't necessarily look at when's the most effective time. I can tell you, pharmacists usually know that better than anyone else. When is a better time for me to take this med? And they can tell you. So again, sleep hygiene, it's also part of the sleep environment, having a healthy sleep environment, less light. Certain temperatures are better for different people. You know, I like a cooler room. And so also, I think the other part is to consider really making an investment in a good mattress. That's important.
Yeah.
And paying attention to that about how you feel on the mattress. I love the way they have the mattresses now where they have the different adjustable sides for partners, right? And so this person can have one much firmer than this person. I like a really soft, squishy, and my husband likes a really firm one, right? So we have a king size bed, and if I roll over onto his side, I'm just like, what happened? You know? And if he comes on my side, he sinks, you know? And so it's the piece of it is what is best for you. And this is really being mindful about that.
We had one of those adjustable, it was a sleep number bed for us. And I would always have mine a little bit lighter. His was a little heavier or firmer. And he would say he would roll over onto my side and it was mashed potatoes. So, yes, I totally get that. Okay. I'm also thinking of the woman who is waking up in the middle of the night with hot flashes or hot flushes, however you want to call it. And so I'm wondering if there's a relationship with that, if we can help manage that, because that, from what I understand, can also be blood sugar related. But talk to us some about how CBTI might be able to help manage those midnight hot flashes.
So midnight hot flashes, yes, can be caused by different things. Obviously hormonal. Obviously it can also be, like you said, sugar related, blood sugar related. It can be blood pressure related. It can be hot flashes, could be something related to trauma where people are struggling with breathing for different reasons, whether it's sleep apnea, again, like I said. And I apologize, there's a lawnmower.
That's fine.
I don't know if you can hear it. And so all of those things can affect it. So usually what I talk to people about first is let's go to the doctor. Let's get some blood work done. Let's find out what else might be going on, right? Because it's not uncommon for women, in particularly late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right, to develop some of those things. And so make sure that's not something going on. But in the meantime, CBTI can help, and it's not like it's going to hurt, right? So practicing the relaxation strategies with regards to getting up in the middle of the night, having a hot flash, depending on what the cause is. No matter what, get up, become present, use the breathing, do some relaxation techniques, see if that helps, right? If it's chemical, what it's going to do is calm some of it down, because some of what's happening is when the brain has that chemical flush, there's still some reaction and response, like what's going on, and we talk about it, is it under attack? And so the heart rate's going to increase, and all of those things, respiration. So if I can just bring that down and calm that down a little bit, I might be able to get back to sleep. Also being, graceful to yourself, being kind to yourself and saying, okay, my body's going through this change right now, and instead of tossing and turning and trying to force yourself to go back to sleep, which increases frustration, you feel helpless, more irritable. Just, again, get up, be kind, have a good book to read for a little bit when you get up and sit in a chair, or have one of the meditations that you can do from the phone app, and just allow yourself to be kind to yourself.
Okay.
And that it's going to get better. It'll pass.
And that sounds, going back up to the narrative, that sounds like that's a good thing to tell ourselves, like, it won't be this way forever. I will go back to sleep, and just kind of using your inner voice to calm yourself down some.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. A good takeaway is the CBTI coach. And the CBTI coach has assessments in there. You can track your sleep progress and have it send messages to you and tell you what your sleep progress is. Because a lot of times we think I didn't do any better, but actually, we did. Look at that. I gained a couple minutes, right? And it's going to take some time to do the reset. But when you can see that, you start to feel more empowered. That's, for me, I felt because I was so helpless. Like, I'm never going to get a good night's sleep. That was the narrative I was telling myself. And once I saw that I was making these changes, it was very empowering.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And especially, I mean, that was 2010. In 2026, there is almost so much panic and fear over a poor night's sleep because now they're talking about how poorly it impacts your health and how it can just push you into having dementia. And I understand the need for education around it, but I sometimes I feel like there's so much intensity on you must get a good night's sleep that it's backfiring.
And what's really frustrating, I think, for us women is that men seem to get they don't seem to have as many problems. I'll get guys that come for, this, guys with sleep apnea, that type of thing. But the hormonal changes that happen for us, those kinds of things, the way our brain works and holds on to stuff is so much different for them.
Yeah. Yes. I believe that. It's not the case at my house. But I mean, my husband's sleep is directly related to the stress level at his work, for sure. And
Yeah.
God bless him, he's trying. So, yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. Okay,
Well, give him the CBTI coach
I will.
and tell him to consider some of those things, because it can't change the level of stress that he has. But I mean, I know, look at my job, right?
Yeah.
Like, and when I was really going through this, I was actually on call 24/7. So
Wow.
I was answering calls from the suicide crisis line for veterans. And so whenever my phone would go off, and I couldn't turn off my notifications, right? And this was part of what the disruption was what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And so learning how to compartmentalize that's what I did when I learned CBTI. I taught myself how to do that.
You mentioned the CBTI coach is created by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Do you have to be a vet to get that, or can anyone get that?
No, anyone can get it.
Okay, so that is available to everyone. Thank you, Department.
It's available
the
to
VA.
everyone. And yep, and then it's also through, believe it or not, post-traumatic stress, like the National Center for PTSD is also one of the sponsors and supporters of that app. There's a lot of apps through the VA that I love. There's also an app that they have called Insomnia Coach. I don't like it as much as CBTI Coach, probably because I feel like I'm like a little CBTI guru girl because I took those classes, with the real people and everything. But they have a mindfulness coach that I recommend a lot to clients. I love that app, Mindfulness Coach.
Okay.
So if you want to expand on the mindfulness activities that you saw in CBTI Coach, Mindfulness Coach, and it's completely free. And when you go into it, you click on Practice Now and then All. And when you click on All, it lists a ton of resources. I love it.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you. We'll include that in the show notes. Okay, I have questions that I ask all of my guests. The first is I love learning about people's tattoos because I have found that when people put something on their body for the rest of their lives, they normally have a reason behind it. So I was wondering if you had a tattoo, and if you did, would you share the meaning behind it? And if you don't have one, but you had to get one, what would it be and where would it go?
Sure, so I do have one. And my husband and I both got a tattoo that I designed, and it's my ring finger.
Oh, cool.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a Celtic heart.
Okay.
And so we both got the same tattoo. And so that is the only tattoo I have. He has other tattoos, but I've wanted to get them, but I was afraid that it would hurt really bad, right? But it didn't hurt as bad as I thought, so I probably would go and consider getting another one.
Okay. I'm surprised to hear that it didn't hurt that bad on your finger, because I've always heard like the closer the skin is to the bone, the more painful it is.
Well, he was jumping more than I was, so I think that was it. I was trying to like prove to him that I could handle it, right? Because he had other tattoos. So
Competition is a great motivator sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Kathleen, I know you have some private practice. Tell us how people can connect with you, and particularly what states that you are licensed to practice in.
Sure. So I do. I have a private practice. I practice mostly on MD Live or Amwell, two platforms, and I also do work with firefighters in just specifically Oregon and Washington. So states of licensure: Connecticut, Florida, Washington, and Oregon. Those are the four that I'm licensed in. And so if anyone's interested in finding me, they can Google me, my name, Kathleen Sassier. It'll show up. I have people find me that way, and then I find out where they're at. And if I can't provide the support for them, then I get them a referral to someone that can.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. And then can you share a meaningful Bible verse with our community?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. I have a bunch, but I was thinking, okay, what's one related to sleep, right? So I just looked it up, and it was Psalm 4:8. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety, right? Because so often we're not sleeping because our brain is trying to keep us safe, and it's afraid of what's going on, and it tries to keep us awake. It could be afraid that we're going to forget something, like these things that we can't stop thinking about what we need to do. Or it could be afraid for safety reasons, right? And so just focusing on the fact that I can give that to God, and that I can be at peace and rest.
That's great. Thank you. I love that. Okay, you get the last word. What is one simple thing that you would like us to remember, big or small, but just one simple thing to leave the conversation with?
Simple thing is, you can get better sleep. You can. And there's so many tools and strategies to do it. You might be able to do it on your own, and that's okay. CBTI coach, one of the others, but I like that one a lot. Or get a therapist. And if you talk to a therapist and they don't know about sleep, like they're not quite sure what you're talking about, then find another therapist, because there are people out there that we do this work.
Okay. All right. That is all for today. Go out there and have a graced day.